My mom told me not to come to New Year's Eve because I would embarrass the family. At midnight, Bloomberg released the billionaire list, and my phone exploded. My phone rang on December 31st at exactly 4:17 p.m. I remember the time because I was sitting alone in my apartment, watching the city prepare for New Year's Eve through a foggy window, debating whether I should even bother staying awake until midnight. I almost didn't answer. But when I saw Mom light up the screen, I sighed and picked up. She didn't say hello. She never does when she's already upset. "Just so we're clear," she said sharply, "tonight is not for everyone." I leaned back in my chair. "Okay? This New Year's Eve is elite only," she continued. "Your brother's boss is coming. His wife too. Very important people." I already knew where this was going. My older brother, Daniel, had been working for a fast-growing tech company for the past 2 years. According to my parents, this made him the second coming of Steve Jobs. Apparently, his boss, Evan Keller, was rumored to be a billionaire. Rumored. Not confirmed. But that was enough for my family to lose their minds. Mom lowered her voice, even though I knew she was alone. "You don't need to come tonight." There it was. I didn't say I was coming, I replied calmly. "Well, good," she said quickly. "Because we're hosting at the house, and this isn't casual. This isn't your crowd." My jaw tightened. "Meaning?" She exhaled like I was the one being unreasonable. "Meaning these people move in different circles. They talk investments, private equity, acquisitions. They vacation in places you can't pronounce. I just don't want anything awkward." I stayed quiet. She took my silence as permission. "You're still figuring yourself out," she added. "And that's fine. But tonight isn't the night to experiment socially." Experiment. I was 34 years old. I had my own apartment. No roommates. No debt. No drama. But according to my family, because I didn't brag about my life or wave money around, I was somehow unfinished. "Your brother has worked very hard," Mom continued. "This is important for his future. Please don't embarrass us." There it was. The sentence she'd used my entire life. "Don't embarrass us." I swallowed. "Is that all?" I asked. "Yes," she said, relieved. "I knew you'd understand." She hung up before I could say anything else. I stared at my phone for a long moment. Then I placed it face down on the table. The family narrative in my family, success had a very specific definition. You had to look impressive. It didn't matter how you got there. Daniel understood this perfectly. He dressed the part, talked the part, dropped names, quoted podcasts, repeated whatever buzzwords were trending that week. My parents loved him for it. Me? I was the quiet one. The one who never explained what he really did. The one who could have done more if he applied himself. The one who had potential but didn't capitalize on it. They knew I worked in finance. They just assumed it was minor. Something behind the scenes. Something safe. Something small. And I never corrected them. New Year's Eve, alone by 9:30 p.m., the city outside my window was buzzing. Fireworks test popped in the distance. Music echoed up from the street. I poured myself a drink and turned on the TV, letting random news coverage fill the silence. I wasn't sad. I was detached. This wasn't the first event I'd been quietly uninvited from. It was just the first time they'd said it out loud. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A notification. Bloomberg alert. I almost ignored it. Almost. Midnight changed everything at exactly 12 a.m., fireworks exploded across the skyline. At exactly 12:01 a.m., Bloomberg published their updated Billionaires Index. I opened the notification. And stared. Then I laughed. Out loud. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The first message at 12:03 a.m., my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Is this you?" Another buzz. Then another. Then a call. Then 5 more messages in a row. By 12:06 a.m., my phone was lighting up nonstop. Texts. Missed calls. WhatsApp messages. LinkedIn notifications. By 12:10 a.m., my mother was calling. Over. And over. And over. I didn't answer. I just stared at the Bloomberg headline glowing on my screen. And for the first time in my life, I let myself smile. Because here's the part they didn't know, the part one never corrected. The part they never asked about. The part that didn't fit their narrative. I wasn't figuring myself out. I wasn't behind. I wasn't potential. I was invisible by design. And at midnight, that invisibility disappeared. At first, I thought there had to be a mistake. That happens when your entire life, people have trained you to believe you're less than. I refreshed the Bloomberg page. Once. Twice. 3 times. The headline didn't change. New entrant joins the global top 500, quiet investor behind multiple tech acquisitions revealed. Below it was a name I hadn't seen in print before. Mine. Not the shortened version my family used. Not the nickname from childhood. My full legal name. Followed by a number so large it almost felt abstract. Net worth, $3.8 billion. I exhaled slowly. Outside, fireworks cracked the sky open like gunfire, but inside my apartment, everything was still. This wasn't new money. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a sudden spike. This was the result of 15 years of deliberate silence. Why no one knew? I learned early that visibility invites opinions. Opinions invite entitlement. And entitlement invites problems. So I built quietly. I stayed off social media. I declined interviews. I invested under holding companies, trusts, and shell structures that pointed nowhere obvious. While my brother talked loudly about disruption and scaling, I sat in rooms where no one raised their voice because everyone already knew their numbers. I didn't need praise. I needed leverage. And leverage works best when people underestimate you. The first call I didn't answer, my phone buzzed again. Mom. Missed call. Then Dad. Then Daniel. Then Mom again. Then a voicemail notification. I let them pile up. Instead, I opened Bloomberg and read the article slowly, carefully, like someone else's biography. They called me a low-profile capital allocator. They mentioned 3 companies I'd helped take public. They referenced acquisitions I'd structured in silence. They called me one of the most private figures in modern finance. I smiled at that. Private. Yes. The party I wasn't invited to at my parents' house, the party was already in full swing. I found this out later, but the timing mattered. Daniel's boss, Evan Keller, was holding court in the living room. Wine in hand. Laughing. Talking about market cycles and future valuations. My parents were glowing. This was their moment. Their son was adjacent to power. And then someone's phone buzzed. Then another. Then another. Someone said, "Hey, is this real?" Someone else pulled up Bloomberg on the TV. And suddenly, the room went quiet. Because the article didn't mention Evan Keller the way they expected. It mentioned him as an executive. A well-paid one. Not the owner. Not the billionaire. Just an employee. Working for me. My brother's realization. Daniel read the name once. Then again. Then out loud. No, that can't be him. My mother laughed nervously. There must be 2 people with that name. But Evan wasn't laughing. He was staring at his phone. Then at Daniel. Then back at the screen. He knew. People like Evan always know who actually signs the checks. "What did you say your brother does again?" someone asked. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. Because suddenly, every story he'd told about me felt thin. Suddenly, every joke about me being quiet or behind felt dangerous. My phone explodes back in my apartment. My phone finally rang with a number I recognized. Daniel. I let it ring. Then I answered. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. I didn't raise my voice. "Happy New Year to you too. Is that article about you?" I paused. Then said, "I didn't want to embarrass you." Silence. Pure, stunned silence. "You work for one of my holding companies," I continued calmly. "Indirectly. 2 layers removed. I assumed you knew." "I didn't," he whispered. "I know," I said. The call from Mom. Minutes later, my mother called again. I answered this one. Her voice was shaking. "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked around my quiet apartment. At the city lights. At the glass of untouched champagne. "You never asked," I said. "That's not fair," she snapped weakly. I laughed. Not cruelly. Just honestly. "You told me not to embarrass you," I reminded her. "So I didn't show up." She started crying. Not because she was proud. Because she was scared. Power changes the conversation. Within 20 minutes, the tone shifted completely. Now they wanted me there. Now it was, family only. Now it was, we should celebrate together. Now it was, you should meet everyone properly. But the invitation felt hollow. Reactive. Too late. What hurt the most, it wasn't that they excluded me. It was why. They didn't think I belonged. Not because I was unkind. Not because I was irresponsible. But because they couldn't see value unless it was loud. And when value finally spoke, it didn't need their approval. One final message at 12:48 a.m., I sent one text to the family group chat. Enjoy the party. I'll see you when you're ready to talk like equals. Then I turned my phone off. And watched the fireworks fade. End of part 2. Part 3. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was excited. Because clarity is loud when it finally arrives. When you stop needing approval, your mind starts replaying every moment you ignored your own instincts just to keep the peace. Every time you stayed quiet. Every time you made yourself smaller so others could feel taller. By 7:12 a.m., my phone was already vibrating on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I made coffee. Black. No sugar. Sat by the window and watched the city wake up like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. The morning after, when I finally turned my phone back on, I had 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, 6 voicemails, a 3 LinkedIn connection requests from people who had never replied to my emails before. Most of the messages followed the same pattern. Shock, confusion, justification, invitation. My mother's texts were long and emotional. My father's were short and stiff. Daniel's were quiet. That scared me more than the rest. Because when someone like him goes quiet, it means they're recalculating. The first apology, that wasn't one. The voicemail from my mother was the longest. Her voice cracked halfway through. We didn't know, sweetheart. You always kept things so private. We just assumed, well, you never talked about success the way your brother did. There it was. The confession hidden inside the excuse. If you don't announce your worth, people will decide it for you. The invitation they thought I'd jump at 9:03 a.m., Daniel finally texted. We should talk. Evan wants to clear the air. Maybe dinner tonight? My place. I read it twice. Then once more. Evan wants to clear the air. Not Daniel. Not family. The man who had unknowingly been reporting upward to me wanted to clear the air. Interesting. I replied with one sentence. Lunch. Neutral place. 1 hour. He responded immediately. Of course. That response told me everything. Watching them arrive, we met at a quiet restaurant downtown. Clean lines. White tablecloths. The kind of place where conversations stay low and egos stay controlled. I arrived early. Sat where I could see the entrance. Daniel walked in first. He looked smaller. Not physically. Energetically. Like someone who had lost the map to a room he thought he owned. Evan followed. Perfect posture. Expensive watch. Calm smile. But his eyes kept flicking toward me, measuring. Assessing. I stood when they reached the table. Extended my hand to Evan. Good to finally meet you properly, I said. He shook it firmly. Yes, he replied. Likewise. Daniel didn't meet my eyes. The shift happened slowly. We ordered. Polite conversation at first. Weather. Travel. Markets. Then Evan leaned back slightly and said, I want to be transparent. None of us knew about your position. I nodded. That was intentional. Daniel shifted in his seat. Evan continued, I hope you understand there was no disrespect intended. I looked at Daniel then. Not Evan. Disrespect doesn't require intention, I said calmly. It requires assumption. Silence. The waiter arrived with water. Set the glasses down gently. Left. When the mask slipped, Daniel finally spoke. You could have told us. I didn't raise my voice. You could have asked. That's not the same, he snapped. It is, I replied. When you care. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Evan watched carefully, like a man realizing he had walked into the wrong meeting. The real issue comes out. Daniel leaned forward. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Everyone thought I cut him off. No, I said quietly. You were humiliated because you built your identity on comparison. That landed hard. Evan cleared his throat. Perhaps we can refocus, he said. This doesn't need to affect our professional relationship. I smiled. That depends. On what? On whether you understand who sets the terms. Power clarified. I placed my napkin on the table. Folded it neatly. I don't interfere in management. That won't change. But I do expect discretion, loyalty, and respect. Especially when family is involved. Evan nodded immediately. Of course. Daniel stared at the table. The question they were afraid to ask. Finally, Daniel looked up. Why didn't you come last night? I held his gaze. Because you didn't want me there. That's not true. You said elite only. You said, don't embarrass us. I listened. He swallowed. The boundary is drawn. I'm not angry, I said. But things will be different now. How? My brother asked. You don't get access to my life by default anymore. You earn it. Evan checked his watch. Daniel didn't move. The quiet victory lunch ended exactly 1 hour later. No shouting. No drama. Just reality settling where fantasy used to live. As I stood to leave, Evan extended his hand again. I look forward to working together, he said carefully. I'm sure you do, I replied. Daniel stayed seated. Didn't hug me. Didn't apologize again. But for the first time in his life, he looked at me without superiority. Only uncertainty. What changed that day? I didn't gain power. I revealed it. And revelation is always uncomfortable for those who benefited from your silence. As I walked back into the city, my phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't rush to check it. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. On whether you understand who sets the terms. Power clarified. I placed my napkin on the table. Folded it neatly. I don't interfere in management. That won't change. But I do expect discretion, loyalty, and respect. Especially when family is involved. Evan nodded immediately. Of course. Daniel stared at the table. The question they were afraid to ask. Finally, Daniel looked up. Why didn't you come last night? I held his gaze. Because you didn't want me there. That's not true. You said elite only. You said, don't embarrass us. I listened. He swallowed. The boundary is drawn. I'm not angry, I said. But things will be different now. How? My brother asked. You don't get access to my life by default anymore. You earn it. Evan checked his watch. Daniel didn't move. The quiet victory lunch ended exactly 1 hour later. No shouting. No drama. Just reality settling where fantasy used to live. As I stood to leave, Evan extended his hand again. I look forward to working together, he said carefully. I'm sure you do, I replied. Daniel stayed seated. Didn't hug me. Didn't apologize again. But for the first time in his life, he looked at me without superiority. Only uncertainty. What changed that day? I didn't gain power. I revealed it. And revelation is always uncomfortable for those who benefited from your silence. As I walked back into the city, my phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't rush to check it. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. The family meeting happened 2 days later. Not because I requested it. Because my absence had finally become louder than my presence ever was. My mother called at 6:48 a.m. Her voice was soft. Careful. The voice she used when she wanted something without admitting it. We need to talk, she said. All of us. As a family. I already knew what that meant. They weren't calling to understand me. They were calling to restore balance. Their balance. The house that never felt like home. I drove to my parents' house just before noon. Same place. Same driveway. Same porch where I had stood for years trying to explain myself without sounding defensive. Daniel's car was already there. So was my sister-in-law's. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and anxiety. Everyone was seated when I walked in. That was the first sign this wasn't a conversation. It was an intervention. The opening statement. My mother stood up immediately. She hugged me too tightly. As if proximity could undo years of distance. We just want to understand, she said, guiding me toward the couch. No judgments. That was the first lie. The narrative they had prepared. My father spoke next. You've always been independent, he said slowly. Private. That made it hard for us to know where you stood. Translation, you didn't perform success the way we recognize it. Daniel crossed his arms. You made us look stupid, he added. In front of Evan. In front of everyone. There it was. Not hurt. Not confusion. Embarrassment. I let them talk. This is the part most people get wrong. They interrupt. They defend. They try to prove something. I didn't. I let them talk. My mother cried. My father sighed. My brother explained how much pressure he was under. How important optics were. How I could have helped if I'd just said something. Every sentence centered on how my silence affected them. No one asked why I chose it. The moment I finally spoke. When the room went quiet, my mother looked at me with hopeful eyes. "So," she asked. "What do you have to say?" I leaned forward slightly. Calm. Measured. "I didn't hide my life," I said. "I protected it." They froze. The truth they didn't expect. For years, I continued, every conversation turned into a comparison. Every success of mine was either minimized or treated like an inconvenience. I learned early that the safest way to exist in this family was quietly. Daniel scoffed. "That's not fair." I nodded. It usually doesn't feel fair when the mirror finally works. My mother's breaking point. She started crying harder. "We're your family," she said. "We deserve to know." I looked at her. "No," I said gently. "You deserved honesty. Not access." That distinction hit her harder than anger ever could. The line that changed everything. My father finally raised his voice. "So what now?" he demanded. "Are you punishing us?" I stood up. "No," I said. "I'm choosing myself." Silence. The kind that feels heavy because everyone realizes something irreversible has happened. The boundary. "I'm not cutting anyone off," I continued. "But things change today." "Change how?" Daniel asked. "You don't get updates unless I offer them. You don't get explanations unless I choose to give them. And you don't get to define me by who I'm standing next to." My mother looked terrified. "Are we losing you?" I paused. "Only if you keep trying to own me." Leaving without applause. No one stopped me when I walked toward the door. No dramatic last words. No shouting. Just the sound of a family realizing control doesn't equal connection. As I stepped onto the porch, my phone buzzed. A notification. Not from family. From an old contact I hadn't spoken to in years. A message that read, "Saw the Bloomberg update. We should talk. Big opportunity." I smiled. Because while they were trying to pull me backward into comfort, the world was quietly opening doors in front of me. What I learned that day: sometimes the people who say, "We're family," mean, "We're familiar." And familiarity hates growth it can't supervise. I drove away without music. Just the sound of the engine and my own breathing. Steady. Unapologetic. Free. The call came the next morning. 7:12 a.m. unknown number. I almost ignored it. I didn't. That single decision shifted everything. "The offer, is this Ethan?" a calm male voice asked. "Yes. This is Mark Caldwell. I work with the Bloomberg private markets team." I sat up in bed. Fully awake now. "We monitor founders and major private holders," he continued. "Your name surfaced after last night's index update." I stayed silent. He took that as permission to continue. "There's interest in you. Real interest. The truth about the index: here's something most people don't understand. The Bloomberg Billionaire Index isn't just a scoreboard. It's a signal. When your net worth changes position significantly, it triggers conversations behind closed doors. Banks notice. Funds notice. People with leverage start asking questions. That night, my phone hadn't exploded because of gossip. It exploded because capital had discovered me. Why they were calling now: "We've tracked your holdings quietly for years," Mark said. "You don't attend conferences. You don't court media. You don't posture." I smiled. "That was intentional," I replied. "Exactly," he said. "That's why people are paying attention." The invitation. He got to the point. "There's a private round forming. Strategic only. No press. No noise." He named the figure. I didn't react. But my chest tightened. "This isn't about money," he added. "It's about influence. The kind that compounds." I asked the only question that mattered. "Why me?" "Why me? Because you built quietly," he said. "Because you didn't need validation. Because you didn't burn bridges chasing attention." Then he paused. "And because people like you don't usually say yes." I asked for time. 24 hours. That's all I asked for. He agreed. But before hanging up, he said something that stuck with me. "Your brother's boss doesn't know this yet." I laughed. Softly. The inevitable call 3 hours later. "Daniel." I let it ring. Then again. And again. I finally answered on the fourth call. "What do you want?" I asked. No greeting. No warmth. Just truth. "Daniel's panic, you're on Bloomberg," he said. His voice cracked. Not disbelief. Fear. "You're trending internally. Evan's office is buzzing." I leaned back in my chair. "So?" There was silence on the line. "Then, why didn't you tell me?" The line he wasn't ready for. "Because you never asked," I replied. "And when you did, it was never about me." He tried to recover. "You don't understand what this means," he said. "This affects my job." There it was again. Always orbiting someone else's gravity. "The power shift, Daniel," I said calmly. "I didn't rise overnight. You just weren't looking." His voice dropped. "Evan wants to meet you." I smiled. The offer beneath the offer. This wasn't about connection. It was about leverage. Daniel wasn't calling as a brother. He was calling as an intermediary. A bridge he suddenly realized he should have maintained. My answer, "No," I said. "What?" he snapped. "I'm not meeting him." He lost control. "You're being petty." I corrected him. "I'm being precise." The boundary he finally felt. "For years," I continued, "you needed me invisible so you could feel important. Now you need me visible so you can stay relevant." I paused. "I'm done playing both roles." The call ends. He didn't argue. He couldn't. He just hung up. Accepting the future that night, I called Mark back. "I'm in," I said. No hesitation. No conditions. Just clarity. The real celebration. I didn't go to a party. I didn't post. I didn't toast with champagne. I sat alone on my balcony. City lights below. Phone face down. No applause. Just peace. Because the best revenge isn't success. It's freedom without explanation. The fallout didn't come with fireworks. It came with silence. The kind of silence that only happens when power quietly changes hands. The collapse. No one announced. Daniel didn't call again. Not that day. Not the next. But the consequences reached me anyway. 3 days after I accepted the offer, Mark sent a short message. "Evan just found out you declined the meeting." He wasn't offended. He was impressed. That told me everything. People at that level don't chase. They notice. And when they notice restraint, they pay attention. What happened to Daniel? I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from someone else. A mutual contact. Neutral. Observant. "Your brother's position changed," he said carefully. "Not fired. Not promoted. Repositioned. Which in that world means, demoted without humiliation. Daniel was no longer the guy with proximity. He was just another executive. The aura was gone. And with it, the leverage he'd built his identity around. The family reaches out. My mother called that Sunday. Her tone was softer now. Careful. Measured. "We didn't know," she said. That phrase again. As if ignorance absolves neglect. "I didn't think you'd take it this way," she added. I didn't respond immediately. So she kept talking. "We were just trying to protect the image, you know how these people are." The sentence that ended it, "I do," I said calmly. "That's why I stayed away." She didn't expect that. "What do you mean?" "I learned early that in this family," I continued, "love came with conditions. And I decided to live without them. No argument. No closure speech." She tried to pivot. Invitations. Dinners. Reunions. New Year's, redone. I declined everything. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just, consistently. Because boundaries don't need explanations. They need maintenance. The moment of understanding. Weeks later, I was in a private meeting room. No cameras. No press. Just men and women who moved markets without announcing it. Someone asked me casually, "So, what was your turning point?" I thought of the call. The words. "Don't embarrass us." And I answered honestly. When I realized I was already successful. I just wasn't visible to the people who never really saw me. There was a nod around the table. They understood. The quiet win. I didn't attend elite parties. I didn't reclaim a seat at anyone's table. I built my own. Smaller. Quieter. Stronger. I hired people who didn't care about my last name. I partnered with those who respected silence more than noise. I stopped shrinking so others could feel tall. The last message on the anniversary of that New Year's Eve, I received one text. From my mother. I hope you're happy. I replied with one word. I am. And that was true. Final truth: some families don't celebrate your success. They tolerate it, until it outgrows their control. When that happens, you don't owe them proof. You owe yourself peace.